The stars above the war-torn planet burned cold and distant, casting pale light over the battlefield where two great forces clashed. The human fleet had been outnumbered and outgunned from the start, yet they fought with a defiance that unsettled the alien commanders. Among them was Captain Elias Ward, a man whose reputation for resilience had spread across sectors. He had not come to this world for conquest, but to defend the last human colonies in the region. The alien empire, proud and ancient, saw his defiance as an insult that could not go unanswered. From the shadows of the sky, the alien flagship descended with precision. Its hull shimmered in the dim light, etched with glowing patterns that pulsed like the heartbeat of a living creature. At its helm stood Commander Solara Veyren, a warrior of unmatched skill and beauty among her people. Her orders were clear: destroy the human resistance, capture its leader if possible, and end the fight swiftly. But as her gaze swept over the chaos below, she spotted a single human figure moving through the smoke with unshakable purpose, and something about him made her pause. The ground forces surged forward under her command, overwhelming the scattered human defenses. Plasma fire lit up the ruins as alien soldiers cut through resistance. Elias fought until his weapon overheated, then drew a blade from his side and pressed on. Every move was calculated, every strike efficient, and it became clear he was no ordinary officer. By the time he was surrounded, he stood alone among a field of fallen warriors, his breath steady, his eyes defiant. Solara stepped forward herself to claim him, her armored boots echoing against the broken stone. "You are Elias Ward," she said, her voice calm but sharp as the edge of her blade. "You will come with me." He did not answer at first, only looking at her with an expression that dared her to force him. When her soldiers moved, he fought again, but exhaustion finally betrayed him. He was bound in chains of alien alloy and brought aboard her ship. The war outside raged on, but for Solara, the capture of the human captain marked the turning point of this campaign. In the dim light of her flagship's holding chamber, Elias stood tall despite the restraints. His uniform was scorched, his face marked with dirt and blood, but his spirit was unbroken. Solara dismissed the guards and stepped closer, curious to see what kind of human could endure such odds. "Your people are finished here," she said quietly. "Surrender, and I might spare what remains." Elias met her gaze without flinching, his voice steady. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started." The words stirred something in her she could not name. Outside the holding cell, the War Council of the alien fleet debated their next move. Some demanded Elias be executed to send a message, while others saw him as a valuable bargaining chip. Solara said nothing, though her mind was far from the strategy table. Something about the human's calm confidence unsettled her. It was not arrogance, but a certainty that hinted at something larger. She had studied humans before: warriors, diplomats, merchants, but Elias was unlike any she had encountered. It was as if he was waiting for something to happen. When she returned to his cell, she found him staring out the narrow viewport at the battlefield below. Smoke curled into the sky, but the human fleet had not retreated as expected. Instead, they moved with precision, regrouping in patterns that seemed almost reckless. "Your people are still fighting," she said, stepping closer, "even when defeat is certain." Elias turned to her then, a faint, dangerous smile on his lips. "That's because defeat isn't certain, not for us." The way he spoke made her feel as though she was standing on the edge of a precipice, unaware of what lay below. Solara had captured countless enemies in her lifetime, but none who looked at her the way Elias did, as though he saw something in her she did not see. In herself. For the first time, she wondered if this war would end the way her superiors believed. She had been trained to see humans as clever but doomed, fierce but fragile. Yet the man before her stood like a storm waiting to break, and part of her feared what would happen when it did. Solara did not sleep that night, her thoughts circling around the human captain she had taken prisoner. She told herself it was because he was dangerous, that his presence could inspire defiance among the remaining human forces. Yet deep down, she knew there was more to it. His words carried weight, not just as a threat, but as a promise. She had faced countless enemies, and most broke quickly under her command. Elias Ward, however, seemed to grow stronger the longer he was held. At dawn, she ordered him brought to the strategy chamber. The alien officers around the table fell silent when Elias entered, bound but unbowed. The map before them displayed the current positions of their fleets and the human resistance. One of her sub-commanders scoffed at him, calling humans reckless and short-lived. Elias only looked at the glowing display and said, "You've left your flank exposed." When the officers laughed, Solara noticed his eyes were not mocking, but certain, and that certainty unsettled her. Curious despite herself, Solara allowed him to speak. Elias described maneuvers that could break their current formation, pointing out weaknesses no alien strategist had seen. His knowledge of space combat was sharp, and though some dismissed his words as tricks, Solara listened carefully. It was as if he was not just trying to save his people, but testing her, seeing if she would recognize the truth when she heard it. She found herself wanting to hear more, though she would not admit it aloud. After the meeting, she walked with him through the ship's central corridor. The hum of alien engines surrounded them, and soldiers stepped aside as they passed. "You could save your people by giving me the information I want," she told him. "Tell me where your fleet is hiding." Elias glanced at her with calm defiance. "And you could save yours by listening to me." His voice carried no fear, only conviction, and it made her wonder what he knew that she did not. Reports from the battlefield soon reached her. The human forces, though vastly outnumbered, had launched a counterattack in a sector thought to be abandoned. The precision of their movements mirrored the strategies Elias had hinted at. It was too coordinated to be coincidence. Solara began to suspect that capturing him had not weakened the humans at all. It had been part of their plan. If so, she had underestimated them, and underestimating an enemy could be fatal. That night, she visited his cell again, this time without guards. The soft glow of the energy barrier cast shadows across his face, highlighting the quiet strength in his gaze. "You planned to be captured," she said, her voice low. Elias didn't deny it. "You wanted a leader to study," he replied, "and I wanted to study you." His words struck her harder than any weapon. She was used to being the one in control, yet here she felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her. She asked him, "Why? Why risk himself? Why walk into the hands of the enemy?" His answer was simple, yet it lingered in her mind. "Because wars aren't won by fleets alone. They're won by understanding the people you're fighting, and the ones you're fighting for." She realized then that his presence was not just about tactics or negotiation. He was here to change something, though whether it was the war or her, she could not yet tell. As she left his cell, her mind was no longer on the simple victory her empire had promised her. The human captain had planted seeds of doubt where none had grown before. For the first time in years, Solara wondered if she was fighting for the right cause. And she feared that once she found the answer, it would be too late to turn back. The tension aboard the flagship grew heavier with each passing day. The alien officers noticed their commander spending more time near the human prisoner, and whispers began to spread. Some believed she was trying to break him for intelligence. Others suspected something more dangerous, a shift in her loyalty. Solara ignored them, but she knew the council would not. Still, she found herself drawn to Elias Ward's quiet resolve, as though understanding him was now as important as winning the war. A new transmission arrived from the front lines. The human fleet had performed another daring maneuver, striking deep into alien supply routes before vanishing into uncharted sectors. Losses were mounting, not in overwhelming numbers, but in precision strikes that crippled key operations. As she reviewed the reports, Solara recognized the patterns. They were the same principles Elias had spoken of in the strategy chamber. It was as if he was waging the war from inside her ship without ever leaving his cell. When she confronted him about it, Elias only smiled faintly. "You're starting to see it, aren't you?" he said. She demanded answers, but he offered none directly, speaking instead about the difference between victory and survival. "You can crush a fleet, but you can't crush an idea," he told her. The words lingered with her long after she left, echoing in her thoughts during briefings and patrols. She had been raised to see humans as stubborn and chaotic, yet here was one whose mind was sharper than many of her own commanders. Her sub-commanders grew restless, urging her to execute him before he could cause further trouble. They argued that his influence was already spreading, even among the lower-ranked alien crew. A few guards had been caught speaking with him, drawn by his calm confidence and strange perspective on the war. Solara denied their requests, insisting that he remained valuable. In truth, she was not sure whether she was protecting him for the sake of strategy or something far more personal. The turning point came during a sudden attack. A rogue human strike team breached the outskirts of her fleet's formation, forcing the flagship into active defense. Amid the chaos, the ship's navigation systems were damaged, leaving it drifting dangerously close to an asteroid cluster. Elias, still restrained, requested to be brought to the bridge. At first, Solara refused, but the situation worsened with each passing moment. Against the protests of her officers, she ordered him released under guard. On the bridge, Elias assessed the tactical display in seconds. He issued orders with precision, instructing the alien crew to adjust course and use the asteroid field as cover. The crew hesitated, but Solara overrode their doubts and commanded them to follow his lead. Within minutes, the human strike team was trapped in the field, unable to pursue without risking destruction. The flagship escaped without further damage, and the crew exchanged stunned glances, realizing the prisoner had saved them. After the danger passed, Solara walked with Elias through the quiet corridors. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her tone unreadable. Elias glanced at her, his expression calm. "You're my enemy, but your crew didn't deserve to die for nothing." His words cut deeper than she expected. They carried no flattery, no attempt at manipulation, just a simple truth that left her unsettled. She had always believed mercy was a weakness, yet in that moment, it felt like strength. That night, Solara stood alone in her quarters, replaying the events over and over in her mind. She had captured a man she thought would be a weapon to break. Yet he was changing the shape of the war in ways she could not have predicted. The more she learned about him, the more she feared that his presence was not weakening her world, but reshaping it entirely, and that soon she might not be able to stop it. The council summoned Solara to account for her decisions. Their holographic forms towered above her in the chamber, voices sharp with accusation. They demanded to know why the human captain still lived, and why he had been allowed access to the bridge. She answered with controlled calm, explaining that his actions had saved the flagship from destruction. Yet she could feel the weight of their distrust, pressing harder with every word. They saw her choices not as strategic flexibility, but as dangerous attachment. When she left the chamber, she found Elias waiting in the holding corridor. He had been returned to his cell after the asteroid escape, yet his posture carried no sign of defeat. "I don't trust you anymore," he said quietly. She met his gaze without answering, though the truth of his words stung. She was no stranger to political pressure, but never before had it come tangled with doubt in her own convictions. And never before had a prisoner been the source of that doubt. Outside the flagship, the war escalated. Human forces began striking deeper into alien-held space, targeting communication hubs and supply stations. Each attack seemed designed not to destroy entirely, but to disrupt, to slow, to force the Empire into making costly choices. Solara could see the pattern now. These moves were deliberate, coordinated, and in perfect rhythm with the ideas Elias had shared during their conversations. It was as if he was shaping the battlefield from behind alien walls. Late one cycle, she visited his cell again, this time with a question she had avoided for too long. "What is it you want from me?" she asked. Elias studied her for a long moment before answering. "To understand that the war you're fighting isn't the war you think it is." His voice was calm, yet every word pressed into her like a blade. She wanted to dismiss him, to cling to the pride of her command, but the unease growing in her chest would not allow it. The next day, her ship intercepted a coded human transmission. The crew worked quickly to decrypt it, and what emerged made Solara's pulse quicken. It was not a message to the human fleet, but to her sent through channels Elias should not have been able to reach. The message contained only coordinates and a warning: choose wisely. She confronted Elias immediately, demanding to know how he had sent it. His response was a quiet smile that made her feel as though she had stepped into a game whose rules she did not yet understand. The coordinates led to a remote sector on the edge of contested space. Against her officer's advice, Solara diverted the flagship there, citing the need for reconnaissance. When they arrived, they found not an ambush, but a drifting alien hospital vessel, badly damaged and under attack by pirates. Solara ordered an immediate rescue, destroying the raiders and bringing the survivors aboard. Among them were civilians from multiple worlds under the Empire's protection. The crew began to whisper that perhaps the human prisoner had saved more alien lives than many of their own commanders. That night, as the rescued civilians were given medical care, Solara confronted Elias again. "You knew what was there," she said. He nodded once. "I knew you'd make the right choice if given the chance." The simplicity of his answer struck her harder than any speech could have. It was not flattery nor manipulation, it was trust. Trust from a man who had every reason to see her as an enemy. And for the first time, she felt the stirrings of trust toward him in return. In the quiet hours before the next council transmission, Solara stood at the viewport, watching the stars drift past. She had begun this war believing in the unshakable strength of her empire and the absolute certainty of its cause. Now, with a single human prisoner challenging everything she thought she knew, the certainty was crumbling. She could not yet see where this path would lead, but she knew one truth with absolute clarity: her world was already changing. The council's next message arrived with icy formality. They accused Solara of acting outside her mandate and jeopardizing the war effort. Her rescue of the hospital vessel had been broadcast across multiple systems, sparking both admiration and outrage within the Empire. Some saw it as an honorable act, others as a dangerous sign of weakness. She stood in the center of the command chamber, her posture unyielding as she defended her choices. But beneath the steel in her voice, she felt the weight of their eyes, judging every breath she took. When the transmission ended, Elias was escorted into the observation deck under heavy guard. He looked out at the vast spread of stars before speaking. "You saved them because it was right, not because it was ordered." His words were simple, yet they struck at the heart of her turmoil. She had been trained to serve the Empire without question, to believe that the cause justified any sacrifice. Now she found herself questioning whether the cause itself was worth following. Tensions on the flagship began to crack. Officers who once obeyed her without hesitation now whispered in the halls. Some admired her decision to spare lives, while others saw it as betrayal. Elias noticed the shift too, though he never gloated. Instead, he observed quietly, his eyes always searching her face when they spoke. It was as if he was measuring her resolve, waiting to see if she would cross the line between loyal commander and something far more dangerous to the Empire's war machine. A sudden distress call broke the uneasy routine. A small human freighter was under attack by mercenaries, drifting near a volatile nebula. Solara's officers urged her ignore it, insisting it was bait for a trap. She hesitated, knowing they might be right. But when Elias said, "If you turn away now, you'll prove to them you're exactly who they think you are," she gave the order to intercept. The bridge crew followed reluctantly, tension thick in the air. The rescue was chaotic and fast. Navigating the nebula's unstable currents, Solara's ship neutralized the mercenaries while shield drones surrounded the freighter. As the humans were brought aboard, she recognized the gratitude in their eyes, the same gratitude she had seen from the alien civilians days before. It made her realize that survival, regardless of species, carried the same desperate hope. For the first time, she felt the war not as a political struggle, but as a chain of choices shaping countless lives. In private, she confronted Elias about the risks they had taken. "You could have been wrong," she said. He met her gaze with steady calm. "Sometimes you take the risk not because you're sure, but because you can't live with doing nothing." His voice carried no arrogance, only conviction. She understood then that his strength was not only in strategy, but in the weight he placed on each life. It was a strength she had been taught to dismiss, but now found herself respecting. News of her actions spread faster than she anticipated. Both human and alien channels began to speak of her in the same breath, as a commander who valued life over orders. It was a dangerous reputation, one that could undermine her standing in the Empire while simultaneously making her a symbol to others. She caught Elias watching her during one of these broadcasts, his expression unreadable. For reasons she could not name, she didn't want to disappoint him. That night, as the ship drifted through silent space, Solara stood in her quarters with a growing awareness that she had crossed an invisible line. She was no longer simply holding a prisoner. She was listening to him, learning from him, allowing his values to seep into her own. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it brought a sense of clarity she had not felt in years. The war was changing, and so was she, and there would be no turning back. The Empire's patience finally broke. A direct order arrived from the Council demanding that Elias be transferred to a high-security facility deep within Imperial territory. The message was laced with threats, reminding Solara of her duty and the consequences of disobedience. She read it twice, the weight of the decision pressing against her chest. To follow the order meant surrendering him to a fate she could no longer ignore. To refuse meant defying everything she had sworn to serve. When Elias heard of the transfer, he did not look surprised. "You knew this was coming," he said quietly. She did not answer at first, standing near the viewport with her hands clasped behind her back. His calm acceptance only deepened her turmoil. She had seen many prisoners face their end, but none like him, none who carried themselves with the quiet certainty that even in defeat, they had already made their mark. Her officers, divided as ever, argued fiercely over the decision. Some insisted that obeying the council would restore her standing, while others feared what would happen if she gave him up. In the heated discussion, Solara remained silent, her thoughts turning over every moment since his capture. She had watched him save lives on both sides, challenge the war's very foundation, and plant doubts in her that no one else could have reached. The truth was unavoidable. He had changed her. The night before the scheduled transfer, Solara went to his cell alone. The corridor was quiet, the hum of the ship's systems steady in the background. "If I let you go, you'll return to your fleet," she said. Elias met her gaze with steady calm. "If you keep me, you'll lose everything you've built." Here, the simplicity of his words cut through her conflict. She realized that the question was not whether to keep him or release him. It was whether she could live with herself afterward. In the early hours, she called her most trusted crew to the command deck. No recorders, no official logs. Orders were given in hushed tones, each step carefully measured. The ship altered course toward a neutral zone, far from Imperial eyes. Officially, it would appear as though a systems malfunction had delayed the transfer. Unofficially, Solara was preparing to set the human captain free. Every move carried risk, yet the resolve in her chest felt sharper than any blade. When the moment came, Elias stood at the airlock in borrowed gear, his eyes fixed on hers. "You're choosing the harder path," he said. She allowed herself a small, faint smile. Maybe the right path is always the harder one. The airlock opened, revealing the shuttle that would take him beyond the Empire's reach. For a heartbeat, neither moved, as if acknowledging the gravity of what they were about to do. Then he stepped forward, and she knew the choice was final. Shuttle vanished into the dark expanse, swallowed by the endless sea of stars. Solara stood there long after it was gone, her mind racing with the consequences to come. The Council would see this as betrayal. Her command could be stripped, her honor erased, her life forfeit. And yet, for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. She had acted not as a soldier bound to an empire, but as a leader bound to her own conscience. Back in her quarters, she looked out at the stars and wondered when their paths might cross again. Elias Ward was no longer her prisoner, but something far more dangerous to the Empire, a living reminder that even the strongest walls could be broken from within. And in her heart, she knew that the war was no longer about victory or defeat. It was about the world they might shape if they were willing to defy everything that came before. Rumors of Solara's actions spread faster than she anticipated. Within days, fragments of the truth reached both human and alien territories, though none could confirm the details. Some claimed she had executed Elias in secret, others whispered that she had traded him for information. A few even believed the unthinkable, that she had let him go freely. The Council issued carefully worded denials, but the unease rippled through the Empire like cracks forming in glass. Her own crew was no less divided. Some officers avoided her gaze, fearful of the political storm gathering above them. Others, though silent, seemed to carry a newfound respect for her. Those who had fought beside her during the hospital vessel rescue or the Nebula mission now understood her decisions in a different light. They did not ask questions about Elias, and she offered no answers. The silence between them was a shield, fragile but necessary. Human broadcasts began to hint at coordinated strikes deep within Imperial space. They spoke of a commander whose tactics mirrored the style of a certain captain once thought lost. Solara watched one such broadcast from her quarters, the human narrator's voice filled with pride. She did not know where Elias was now, but the movements bore his mark. It was as though the galaxy itself was becoming his battlefield, and she could not help but feel a quiet satisfaction. The Council's suspicion sharpened into hostility. An Imperial summons ordered Solara to return to the capital for formal inquiry. She knew what awaited her there: accusations, trials, perhaps even execution. Still, she made preparations to comply, masking her intent beneath routine discipline. Yet a part of her mind remained elsewhere, wondering if Elias had anticipated this turn. It would be like him to set events in motion that reached far beyond. Their last meeting, as her fleet made its slow approach toward the Imperial core, an encrypted transmission arrived. No origin code, no traceable signal. Only her personal access key could unlock it. The message was short and direct. "You stood for me. Now I stand for you." Attached were coordinates far from her current course. She read them twice, her pulse steadying with an almost dangerous calm. The choice before her was clear: obey the summons, or follow the path Elias had left for her. Changing course would be open defiance, an act that could not be explained away as error. Yet as she stared at the coordinates, she realized the Council's judgment no longer held the same power over her. What mattered now was the cause she had begun to see through Elias's eyes. It was not about species or borders, but about the lives shaped by the war's endless reach. In that moment, the Empire's chains felt looser than they ever had. She summoned her senior crew to the strategy chamber. Her voice was steady as she explained a false scenario about intercepted enemy activity. Orders were given to redirect the fleet toward the coordinates. Not all believed her reasoning, but none challenged it openly. They moved as commanded, their trust in her unbroken despite the shadows hanging over them. For the first time in weeks, Solara felt the bridge crew united in purpose. Hours later, the fleet slipped into a quiet sector lit only by distant suns. What awaited them there was still unknown, but the air aboard the flagship carried a charge of anticipation. Solara stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the endless black ahead. She did not know if she would find Elias an ally or a trap, but she knew she was no longer walking the path the Empire had chosen for her. This was her war now, and she would fight it on her own terms. The fleet emerged from hyperspace into the coordinates Elias had sent. At first, the sector seemed empty, except for a faint signal coming from a cloaked station orbiting a dying star. Solara ordered a careful approach, sensors sweeping for hidden threats. The station's outer hull bore marks of age and neglect, yet the signal carried the distinct frequency of human technology. As the flagship drew closer, docking clamps extended, as though the station had been expecting them. Inside, the corridors were dim but operational. Solara moved with a small escort, her eyes scanning every shadow. The air was warmer than expected, tinged with the faint hum of old but well-maintained systems. They reached a central chamber where a single figure waited. Elias stood there, unarmed, wearing a worn flight jacket instead of the prison garb she had last seen. The sight of him sent a ripple through her, a mix of relief, suspicion, and something far more personal. "You came," he said simply, as though it had been inevitable. Solara studied him for a long moment before answering. "You sent for me." He gestured toward a large table displaying a star map marked with shifting lines of control. "The war is changing," he said. "Not just between our peoples, but across the galaxy. Others are ready to choose sides, and some will follow whoever proves they can protect more than their own." She understood then that this was no reunion born of sentiment. This was strategy. Elias explained that the station was a meeting point for dissidents, deserters, and civilians from both factions. Here, loyalty to species mattered less than survival. He spoke of building an alliance outside the Empire's and humanity's control, one that could force both to end the war. Solara listened without interruption, her mind turning over the risks. This was open rebellion, not just against the Council but against the foundation of her own upbringing. Yet the conviction in his voice made it sound possible. Her escort shifted uneasily, aware of the danger in hearing such plans. Solara dismissed them, leaving her alone with Elias. "If I walk this path, I can't go back," she said. He met her gaze without hesitation. "That's the point. We build something new, or we stay chained to what's killing us." His words carried no softness, only the weight of choice. She had made countless decisions in battle, but this felt heavier than any she had faced before. They spoke for hours, tracing possible moves on the star map. Each scenario balanced risk and gain, life and loss. Elias treated her not as an enemy commander, but as an equal partner, challenging her ideas and respecting her counters. By the time they stepped away from the table, the shape of a plan had begun to form. It was not a promise of victory, but of change, a chance to break the cycle both sides had accepted for too long. When she returned to her fleet, Solara stood before her officers and told them the truth. There was no mention of the Council's orders or pretense of returning to Imperial space. Instead, she spoke of a new mission, one that would place them outside the Empire's control, but inside history's memory. Some faces showed doubt, others quiet resolve. Yet none turned away. She realized then that her crew's loyalty was not to the Empire, but to her. As the fleet prepared to depart, Solara stood once more at the viewport. The stars stretched before her, no longer a map of borders, but of possibilities. Somewhere, in their expanse, alliances would form, battles would be fought, and choices would shape the fate of countless worlds. Elias had indeed shattered her world, but in doing so, he had given her another. And with that gift came the only certainty. She now carried that the war was hers to end.